Oh, it's very hard to take, frankly. It's very... It gives you anguish, and it's not very pleasant. But...
I found my husband in bed, but the person beside him wasn't a woman. At 94, a one-time Hollywood icon has finally spoken the truth the world chose to ignore. Two seemingly glittering marriages didn't just destroy her career and reputation. They shattered her faith in love itself. The man, once praised as an American nobility, hid his homosexuality behind the mask of marriage, while the gifted director she believed would save her turned their home into a prison. After 70 years of silence, Leslie Caron is finally telling everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, and how Hollywood turned its back on a woman brave enough to speak the truth. If you think this is just a story about love, you're mistaken. This is a late confession from a legend, a survivor of fame, desire, and the beautiful lies we call marriage. Now let's turn back time to the years when the lights of Hollywood still burned bright to uncover the truth the industry has spent 70 years trying to bury. How ironic the man who cost me everything could only tremble in the arms of another man. In 1951, Hollywood glittered like a party with no end. Neon signs flashed the names of rising stars, and in the lively crowd appeared Leslie Caron, the petite French dancer with speaking eyes, whom MGM was grooming as the next Audrey Hepburn. But in those first days in the City of Illusions, Leslie made a mistake. She would pay for all her life. She married Geordie Hormel. Geordie, grandson of the Hormel Foods magnate, was the kind of man Hollywood always adored, wealthy, polished, and fluent in words that made women feel singular. They met at a Laurel Canyon party. He wore a white tux, smiling as if he held the world. She, fresh from Paris, with dance shoes worn at the heels, thought she'd found a safe harbor in a strange place. The wedding took place in Beverly Hills, roses blooming around the pool, while the press dubbed them Hollywood's new golden couple. But within weeks, Leslie realized the mansion held no warmth of love, only silence and secrets, heavy as smoke in a closed room. Geordie never slept beside her. Each night he disappeared, blaming late hours at the studio, leaving Leslie alone in a bedroom cold as stone. At first she believed, then doubted, then despaired. The unfamiliar scent on the towels, a shirt marked by a masculine cologne, phone calls that went dead when she picked up, all stacked into a question she dared not voice. Then one July night, under a light rain, Leslie quietly followed her husband's black Cadillac. The car stopped at a small house on the west side. A warm yellow glow spilled from inside. She stepped closer, looked through the window, and her heart stopped. Geordie was embracing a man. Not the embrace of friendship, but of lovers reunited after too long apart. She stood in the rain, shaking as if she had just watched herself erased. When Geordie came home, she broke down. He simply moved in, covered her mouth, and murmured in a voice like cold steel, "You don't understand. And if you speak, I'll make the world laugh in your face." Leslie staggered back, eyes brimming, and he walked away as if he had just finished a routine negotiation. From that day, hell began. Geordie used his power to turn Leslie into a joke. He cut off. Her credit forbade her to leave the house without a driver, and had MGM people watch her every move. On set, Rumors spread Leslie Caron was difficult, unstable, emotionally unwell. No one knew the source except her. One morning she arrived on an American in Paris, and the director shouted at her in front of the crew. "Who do you think you are?" "Garbo." Leslie stood still, swallowing tears. Behind her, whispers. They didn't know that the night before, Geordie had smashed the bedroom mirror because she dared to ask, "Where do you go every night?" The more she hurt, the quieter she became. And within that silence, Geordie pressed harder. He began appearing publicly with other starlets. Photos at Ciro's, Mocambo, the Chateau Marmont. Each shot accidentally leaked to the press. Everyone decided Leslie was jealous, hysterical, a wife who couldn't keep her man. No one knew those women were window dressing, and Geordie's real nights unfolded in private clubs, where men met men under violet lights and slow jazz. One evening, Leslie found a Polaroid in his desk drawer. Two men laughing, arms around each other in a bathtub. One of them was Geordie. She held the picture all night, unsure whether to weep or laugh. Now she understood she had never truly been loved. She had been a cover. But for Geordie, that truth had to be erased. The next day, the papers were flooded with images of Leslie out with a male co-star. Paparazzi shot them at a cafe outside a theater, even in front of the Beverly Hills Hotel. She had no idea they were being tailed. Only when the Los Angeles Examiner ran the front page headline, "Leslie Caron betrays her wealthy husband," did she realize Geordie had set the trap. He used her fame to hide his own truth. In court, Geordie sat with legs crossed and a thin smile. His lawyer read charges that Leslie was immoral, unfaithful, and damaging to family honor. She had no chance to defend herself. MGM cut her contract as soon as the story broke. They feared a same-sex scandal, lost revenue, the ghosts of rumor. In that world, men held power, and women were ruled by their enforced silence. "You've destroyed your own career," the studio head said coldly, as he signed off. "American audiences don't forgive a faithless woman." Faithless. Leslie wanted to scream that she had betrayed nothing but a lie. But it was useless. In Hollywood, truth has no value if it doesn't fit the script men have written. After the divorce, she was thrown out of the mansion. Her name disappeared from film slates. No director dared hire her. Friends vanished. She lived in a small flat in Santa Monica, listening at night to waves against the window and remembering the ticking clock in the old house, the count of every long, lonely hour. A young Life reporter once came by and asked if she regretted it. Leslie smiled sadly. "I don't regret loving. I regret believing that love could cure a lie." Years later, when women's movements began to rise, people cited Leslie Caron as a prime example of how Hollywood crushes women to protect men. But by then, she was gone. No lights, no stage, only a woman who'd once blazed, now branded as a failure. In an old journal, Leslie wrote a single line. "No one knows. When in the place they call the City of Dreams, I learned to wake inside a nightmare." Her story wasn't just a marital tragedy. It was a mirror of an era where women weren't allowed to tell their own truth, where every on-screen smile could hide a silent cry backstage. Geordie Hormel went on to live lavishly opened studios, hosted parties, and was dubbed by the press a powerful, enigmatic man. No one dared mention the man he once kissed in that little West Hollywood house. As for Leslie, the woman who dared to love to hurt and to keep silent, she paid the price for them both. When asked years later in Paris whether she ever forgave him, Leslie only smiled. Forgive, perhaps. Forget, no. Sometimes the only wound that keeps us alive is the one that reminds us we truly loved. And so Leslie Caron's Hollywood dream, once radiant, hardened into a cold prison. A place where lights didn't reveal the truth. They made it disappear. He never hated me. He hated the existence of a woman who forced him to live a lie about the man he loved. The first marriage turned her from icon to culprit, a case without a defense, in a world where men adjudicated truth. He taught me there are prisons warmer than most the ones we call home. After the nightmare named Geordie Hormel, Leslie Caron left Hollywood like someone fleeing a crime she never committed. She returned to Europe with a suitcase of clothes, a few photos, and eyes that once laughed, now weighed with sorrow. Paris greeted her with soaking rain, and there, at an artists' gathering, she met Peter Hall, the young London stage director, newly hailed as the future of British theatre. Peter was unlike any man she'd known. No boasting, no display. His words were soft as breath. When she spoke of her past, he simply held her hand and whispered, "You've met men who loved themselves. Now, let yourself be loved the right way." Those words melted her. After years of being ground down, she needed someone to say she was worthy of love. 3 months later, they married in a small ceremony in Notting Hill, among close friends with a few hurried roses in a glass jar. The first months were a fairy tale. Peter rose early, made coffee-sliced bread, set the table. Each morning, he drove her to the studio, kissed her brow before leaving. In the afternoon, he came to fetch her often, waiting at the gate with a small bouquet. Everyone said she finally found the real thing. When Leslie became pregnant, Peter grew sweeter still. In his low, warm voice, "You should rest. Let me handle things. You've given your life to art now. Let art repay you with a home." And Leslie believed. She believed so much that she turned down 3 major roles, staying home to cook, knit, and listen to rain on the glass. But as the ovation of the stage faded, another sound swelled silence. Peter began to change. No more rides, no more breakfasts, no more tender words. He often came home late with the smell of spirits and a perfume she didn't recognize. When Leslie asked, he scoffed. "Don't start that petty interrogation, Leslie. I'm working." Then she discovered that his work was a new production in London, where the lead was a young blonde, fresh out of drama school. And in rehearsals, Peter taught her more than acting. Whispers reached Leslie like tiny knives. They usually leave the theater together, in his car. One night, Leslie confronted him. Her voice shook but stayed firm. "You're in love with her, aren't you?" Peter turned eyes cold as glass. Women lose their value when they stop shining. You should know that better than anyone. Then he raised his hand and struck her. The blow was so cold, she felt the blood in her veins stop. Their 3-year-old stood in the doorway, sobbing. Peter turned away without another word. That night, Leslie sat on the floor, holding her child and whispering, It's all right. I'm here. But inside she knew she had just lost another piece of her soul. From then on, Peter controlled everything. He locked the cash, severed her ties with old friends, even those in Paris. She wasn't allowed to use the phone unless he was present. Whenever she spoke of returning to film, Peter sneered, "You're old now, Leslie. No one pays to study wrinkles." Sometimes he took her to galas, only to display a happy family image. Brilliant director, once famous actress, wife. On the carpet, he held her hand so tightly, it hurt. In the car, home, he smoked in silence, staring out as if she didn't exist. Leslie tried to make peace. She wrote him a letter saying she was willing to forgive, if only to keep the family intact. Peter tore it up in her face, the scraps falling like snow, and said, "Forgiveness is the privilege of the weak." In the years that followed, their little London house became a prison. Each day, Leslie rose, cleaned, cooked, listened to Peter's knuckles on the study door. Each night he drank alone, eyes fixed on drafts where the heroine was always young, alluring, and fragile, as if he were continually sketching his stage muse. One winter evening, Leslie passed by and saw that actress's photo on his desk. Beneath it, a note in black ink. "She makes me believe in art again." Leslie stood very still. She realized Peter was no different from Geordie. If Geordie loved men more than women, Peter loved only himself and his standing. Both needed her as a tool to prove something to the world. Then came the night that changed everything. London's rain poured down. Peter returned drunk and found Leslie folding clothes to leave. He lunged, gripping her wrist, growling, "You dare leave me? With what will you live? You have nothing but that withered name." Leslie tried to pull free and whispered, "I don't need anything, only freedom." Peter smiled a twisted grin, then shoved her to the floor. Her head struck the table edge. Blood spread, mixing with tears. In that moment, Leslie didn't scream or cry. She stared up at the ceiling, the light blurring, and thought, "I am dying slowly, in the place I called home." That night, when Peter slept, Leslie rose in silence. She gathered both children, the 6-year-old boy and the 3-year-old girl, wrapped them in coats, opened the door, and stepped into the cold rain. The London sky was slate gray. Street lights smeared through the downpour. She carried no money, only a small suitcase and an old family photograph. Their neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, later said, "I saw her walking through the rain, children in her arms, clothes soaked without fear on her face. Only a strange resolve, as if she'd died already, but her heart was still beating." The divorce finalized nearly a year later. Peter kept the house and most of the assets. Leslie had nothing, no reputation, no money, only 2 children and a body mapped with bruises. In 1965, she moved to France, renting a small flat near the Seine. By day, she did voiceover gigs. At night, she told stories to her children. When they asked, "Were you once a..." She smiled. "I was someone on a screen. I'm happier being your mother." They say Peter Hall went on to great success, staging dozens of plays and receiving honors. In interviews, when asked about Leslie Caron, he only replied, "She was fragile. Art doesn't tolerate the fragile." And Leslie, in a rare 1972 interview, said softly, "Peter taught me there are prisons warmer than most the ones we call home. There, you aren't chained by irons, but by love. And sometimes that hurts more than shackles. The interviewer fell silent. Leslie looked out through the window at the quiet river. In the pale afternoon, her face seemed to both lose and find itself. The second marriage had killed what remained of the artist in her, leaving Leslie Caron, a woman who learned to survive by keeping quiet. I have loved. I have forgiven. But I no longer know how to trust. In the summer of 1966, Leslie Caron set foot in Paris again, after more than a decade away. The city seemed unchanged, the cafes along the Seine, the smell of toasted bread in the morning, and the clang of trams on Boulevard Saint-Germain. But for Leslie, everything was different. She was no longer the dancing girl from An American in Paris. She was a single mother with 2 small children and a heart torn apart by time. Her small apartment sat on the 5th floor of an old building on Rue de Verneuil. Every morning she rose early to make breakfast, took the children to school, then walked alone through streets carpeted with fallen leaves. Once she told a friend, "Paris is more beautiful than ever, but lonelier than ever. Because now, I don't see it with the eyes of a dreamer, but of someone who's awake." To get by, she took small roles in French films. Young directors wanted the legendary Leslie Caron, but they didn't understand that the light which once made her blaze now only made her more tired. On set, she acted from memory, not faith. She knew how to smile, how to cry, how to gaze into the distance at the right angle, but she no longer knew how to open her heart. Then one autumn afternoon in 1968, while shooting a small art film in Montmartre, she met Julien Dufresne, a cinematographer 8 years her junior. He wasn't classically handsome, but his eyes were kind and his hands always trembled slightly as he adjusted the camera. When they first met, Julien said only, "The camera loves you because it sees what people no longer see." That sentence kept Leslie quiet for a long time. Perhaps in that moment, she felt seen, something no one had managed in 10 years. Julien began visiting often. At dawn, he'd stop by with a bag of croissants, walk the children to school, then wait for her on the corner after work. Some days, he rode a bicycle with her along the Seine, softly singing Brel. She laughed, the first real laugh in years. The whole of Paris seemed young again in her eyes. On rainy afternoons, they sat in Café de Flore, talking about cinema and the loneliness of artists. Julien didn't ask about the past. He simply listened, as if he knew any question might make her collapse. A year later, he proposed. They were standing on Pont Neuf, the air cold, a thick fog hanging low. His voice trembled. "We are both lonely people, so let's be lonely together." But Leslie looked down at the dark, still river and gently shook her head. "You deserve someone whole, not a fragment like me." Julien was silent. He understood. His love for her was like a beautiful piece of music whose ending he already knew you could listen, but not keep. A few months later, he left Paris for New York to make documentaries. Leslie didn't see him off. She left only a hurried note. "Thank you for making me believe that love doesn't always mean pain." After that came long, quiet years. By the late 1970s, Leslie lived between two worlds, mother and actress, and the shadow of herself. She had passing romances, an Italian writer who drank red wine and wrote love letters in Latin, a black jazz musician who once promised to compose a piece called Leslie's Silence, and a faded Hollywood actor who said, "We're old souls devoured by Hollywood." But no one stayed. No one that could break through the walls she'd built around her heart. In a 1975 interview, imagined by Le Monde, she confided, "I loved like a child in a dark room. When I grew up, I only wanted to switch on the light and walk away." The reporter asked, "Do you still believe in love?" Leslie looked straight ahead, her eyes calm. "I believe love exists. I just don't believe it's for me." It wasn't bitterness, but acceptance. The acceptance of someone who has seen too much. She kept working. In 1970, the L-shaped room was screened again at Cannes, and the audience stood as Leslie took the stage. She stepped up in a simple black dress and bowed. In that moment, the camera caught her eyes, not dazzling, but deep. People said it was the gaze of someone who has passed through hell and lived to tell it. An elderly French director, after the screening, shook her hand and said, "Cinema needs people like you, not for beauty, but for genuine pain." Leslie smiled. "I don't perform pain. I just can't hide it." In the 1980s, she left the stage lights and moved to the suburbs near Fontainebleau. Her 2 children were grown, each with a life of their own. Sometimes she accepted television interviews, but spoke only about film, never about her 2 former husbands. When asked why, she answered softly, "The past doesn't need to be retold to exist. It's still there, like a scar, no longer hurting, but never gone." A journalist asked her about the men in her life, and Leslie smiled. "I met 2 kinds of men. Those who don't dare love anyone for real, and those who love only themselves. Both taught me this: a woman is safest when she needs no one to protect her." In her later years, Leslie rarely appeared. She liked to sit alone on the porch, listen to birds, and read. When someone asked if she regretted anything, she said, "I regret spending so many years waiting for someone to love me the right way. But without those years, I wouldn't have learned that loving myself is a journey too." In May 1990, Leslie was invited to the Venice Film Festival to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. On stage, she set aside her prepared speech and spoke in a calm, slightly trembling voice. "I once thought happiness was being loved. In the end, I realized happiness is being free. Free from promises, from fear, from the memories that once kept me alive." The hall fell silent. A few people cried. They knew that the woman before them wasn't just speaking of her own life. She was speaking for a generation of women ground down by prejudice who still found a way to rise even after their hearts had turned to stone. After 2 marriages, Leslie no longer believed in love, and that loss of faith made her a tragic emblem of a generation crushed by standards set by men. "I once thought they defined my life. Now I know they were only supporting roles in the play I wrote." March 2025. Paris was still cold mist draped over the old rooftops of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. In a small house by the Seine, Leslie Caron, 94, sat by the window, holding a faded teacup. Morning light filtered through white curtains, falling on a face, aged yet still delicate, the pale blue eyes that had witnessed nearly a century of love, hate, and forgiveness. The Vanity Fair France interview took place in that space, warm, quiet, as if time had forgotten it. Before Leslie sat a small microphone and a recorder on the table, while the young reporter, Lucy Moreau, sat still, hardly daring to breathe. She knew she was facing one of the last women of the Golden Age, someone who had lived, loved, and lost in Hollywood's light, and then vanished into her own darkness. Lucy asked very gently, "If you could choose one moment to tell your life story, what would you choose?" Leslie was silent. After a long pause, she set down her cup, eyes distant, and said softly, "Not a moment, but silence. I once chose silence, thinking it was noble, but silence only feeds the guilty." Her voice trembled, but every word was clear. She told it not as someone resentful, but like a storyteller recounting an old dream. Geordie Hormel, her first husband. She called him the luxurious mirage of hell. He taught me how to smile through pain, how to hide my collapse behind powder and paint. In Hollywood, the worst thing isn't betrayal, but being forbidden to speak of it. Lucy whispered, "And Peter Hall." Leslie smiled, a fleeting smile, tinged with sadness and irony. Peter was a mayor with a knife behind his back. He came to save me from loneliness, then made me 100 times lonelier. But without them, I'd never have known who I am. The sentence made Lucy look up. She realized the woman before her no longer spoke like a victim, but like someone who had finished writing a tragedy and was reading it back with grace. Leslie's eyes drifted to the garden. There, beneath a climbing rose, sat an old iron chair where she read the paper each morning and fed the cat. Farther on stood a small wooden rack with a pair of worn, pink ballet shoes hanging from it. Each morning she still practiced a few slow movements, not for anyone else to see, only for herself. "My body forgets many things," she said, "but my legs remember the first steps I learned in Paris at 14. When I dance, I am no one's anything, not a wife, not a mother, not a victim. I am only myself." Lucy asked, "Do you ever feel lonely?" Leslie furrowed her brow, then let out a small laugh. "Loneliness is a privilege of those who live long. But I like it. At least, loneliness doesn't lie to me the way people did." A long silence. Outside, a church bell sounded. Leslie sipped her tea, then looked straight at the recorder. "All my life, people have asked me about those two men, and as if I existed only through them. But the truth is, they were just supporting roles in the play I wrote. I am the lead, though it took me a lifetime to realize it." Lucy pressed her lips together, moved. She asked, "If you could go back, whom would you marry?" Leslie smiled the smile of someone who understands all her own roles. "I would marry myself, the person I forgot for far too long." The room seemed to brighten. She said that after walking away from every relationship, she spent the next 40 years in peace. "I learned to love small things," she said. A cup of tea, an old song, a letter from my daughter sent from Canada. Happiness, it turns out, doesn't lie in the people we love, but in no longer needing them. She spoke slowly, each word sinking into the air. "They once told me I was weak for forgiving, but forgiving was the only way to stop them from owning me. Lucy was about to ask more, but Leslie raised a hand. She stood and walked slowly to a wooden shelf filled with old photographs, shots from the set of Gigi in 1958, a photo with Audrey Hepburn at a Monaco charity event, and a picture of her two children, long ago, now both over 60. She picked up a black and white photo, the wedding picture of her and Geordie. Her eyes held no anger now, only gentle sadness. Back then, I thought I was a bride. Now I know I was an actress in someone else's film. Then she set the picture down, turned and smiled at Lucy. But you know, at least now, I'm rewriting the ending. Lucy left at dusk. From the yard, she saw Leslie standing on the porch, hands lifting lightly, as if practicing a classical ballet step. The evening light washed her lined but peaceful face in gold. Inside, the recorder was still on. Leslie's voice, calm and low, seemed meant for women who had never been heard. We were taught that silence is virtue, that endurance is glory. But I am old now, and I'll say it plainly. There is nothing noble about losing yourself to keep others comfortable. For a moment, time stopped. An old jazz tune drifted from the radio, Piaf's La Vie en Rose, the song that had followed Leslie through her youth. She closed her eyes and swayed. No audience, no lights, only a 94-year-old woman performing for herself for the first and last time without needing to be seen. At 94, Leslie Caron no longer lives in the past of men or the glare of the stage. She tells her own story, not as a victim, but as its author. And that is the final confession. She does not need to be loved or understood, only to live. Paris, 2025. The little house by the Seine still has its windows open. White curtains stirring in the breeze. Inside, Leslie Caron sits at a wooden table, thin hands lifting a teacup, the last light falling across her soft silver hair. On the tea lies Vanity Fair France, with the headline, Leslie Caron, the woman who rewrote her own role. In the garden, late roses bloom. She still practices a few ballet steps each morning, not for anyone to watch, only for herself. The feet that once crossed sound stages and red carpets, then the hell of 2 marriages, now move slowly, but each step remains proud, the quiet speech of a life unbowed. Her voice from that final interview spread across social media, a message to young women today. If someday people remember me, don't remember the roles. Remember that I dared to live honestly, even if too late. Beneath the post, thousands of comments. Leave a white rose emoji, the symbol fans chose to honor her while she is still alive. A symbol, not of death, but of awakening. And at 94, Leslie still smiles when she sees it. She doesn't need adoration nor pity. She wants to leave, only this silence is not peace, and truth, however painful, is the most beautiful dance a life can perform. If you're reading these lines, remember Leslie Caron not as a distant star, but as a woman once defined by other people's names who in the end took herself back. Do not let anyone write your story. Write it yourself with your voice, your wounds, and your own light. Because as Leslie once said, they are only supporting roles, and my life I will be the one to write.